Hello everyone. What I want to do here is offer some reflections on the upcoming lunar eclipse and speak about this Chiron North Node conjunction and what I see unfolding over the next 6 months. This eclipse cycle right now is really the beginning of what I would consider a long-term Chiron initiatory process. So I'm looking forward to delving more deeply into that. So when we're looking at these eclipses, the North Node being in Aries means we're going to be putting a lot of attention towards the ruler, Mars. In the last cycle, Mars was in Libra, moving over the South Node, squaring Pluto. It was a very different ecosystem. We're beyond the Pluto nodal square. We're kind of separating from that now. Pluto has stationed direct, so we're in a very new phase, and now Mars is in Scorpio. It's a completely different ball field. Let's take it bit by bit. Whenever we're dealing with Mars and Aries, we're dealing with something that's inherently untamed. It's sort of anarchistic by its very nature. It's anarchistic because the Mars-Aries archetype within itself doesn't have purpose or direction. We give it purpose and direction. So on the most basic level, there's sort of this more gross, unrefined, instinctual energy. Until and as we develop a sense of purpose and meaning and direction in life, we don't know what to do with that. And in fact, a big part of the learning with Mars and Aries is doing and acting and reacting and then learning afterwards, realizing, okay, well, that's where I was coming from. There's a sort of self-leadership that emerges with the Mars and the Aries archetype that grows over time as we develop more agency and commitment to our own soul growth. It enables us to have more self-control, to say no to certain things and to say yes to other things. It refines what we do with the strong energies that we feel. Otherwise, the desires, the lust, the craving, the aversion, the I want, the will, the anger, all the different strong visceral energies that move through us, it can be very easy to just kind of live by the whim of them moment to moment. But that's not a conscious life. That's not a life that supports evolution. At the same time, none of us are fully conscious. And so there is, during very strong Mars-Aries times, sort of a part of it is meeting these reactive places and sometimes doing our best, but learning in the aftermath, becoming more self-aware. And this is really heightened with Mars being in Scorpio. Mars in Scorpio is one of the most intense, strong, and even potentially volatile signatures for Mars. This is a signature for deep emotional content. Here we're probing into the deepest psychological dimension of our own being, and we can feel very strong visceral craving and aversion, deep reactions. Both Mars and Scorpio in their own way have to do with desire. Mars is conscious choice, right? I want this, we're identifying the thing that we're acting towards or acting against. Scorpio is predominantly unconscious, right? So we're dealing with a predominantly unconscious reality, but needing to make choices and act, but we don't know why we are feeling or what's really going on underneath the surface. So it does offer the potential for a lot of really strong volatile activity. The key is to really get to know ourselves on a deeper psychological level. This eclipse time and this full moon, leading up to the full moon, can be very charged. Right? The possibility for the possibility of victimization, of feeling attacked, a defensiveness can be very strong for us at this time. If we look at this chart, we'll see that Mars is opposite Jupiter. In fact, it's opposite the full moon. So the Taurus Scorpio archetype is very emphasized, and Jupiter is actually really strong. It's strong because Jupiter is opposite the sun, and that's the height of its retrograde journey, where it's at its strength, the apex, almost like the essence, the pinnacle of its retrograde journey. And so it's very internal in that sense. It's very reflective. There's a lot of attention drawn towards this Jupiter right now. So what does that mean? On the one hand, it means we can be exaggerating the intensity of the dramas and the traumas that we're perceiving in our own life. It can be very easy to perceive that the ground of our own stability and security is being threatened by the adversary that we see on the outside. On the other hand, this says if we're slower to act, if we take more time to be with the energy, we can actually cultivate more insight and more perspective, right? So Jupiter can exaggerate any existing belief, which is where we have to be careful here to not, throw the baby out with the bathwater. Really paying attention to the ground that we're walking on. And the positive aspect of that is it can really bring us into awareness of what's really going on. It's insight, it's perspective. It provides a greater understanding of the content of our life. So if we're willing to take our time and be with it, like the energy of being with it, like I can feel it in my belly. Just the being with it is not acting on it. It's not moving from that place where I might come from a more lower vibration in my actions. But this says, okay, there's something to breathe into. There's something to be with. And I think for all of us, there's our creative expressions, be it our meditation, our art, our work, our writing, our song. There are ways that we channel this energy. I mean, a lot of souls that have strong Scorpio energy, you have the darkest of the dark, but then a lot of these people will do really creative things, right? They're transmuting this energy, and relative to Taurus, it's giving it some kind of ground to move and to kind of be seen and to be understood, to be able to assimilate it. The things that feel hard, and one of the issues with Mars and Scorpio, and we'll get into the Chiron North Node in a moment, would be the psychology of entrapment. Seeing that our conditions or our relationships or dynamics in our life are such that it is imposing upon the freedom that we otherwise need to be who we are and do what we need to do, right? There's no psychological there's no disempowered psychological state greater than believing and perceiving ourselves to be fundamentally blocked or limited in some essential way. That external conditions are blocking or taking from us that which we otherwise need for our freedom. So when we meet that, we're actually facing our own psychological weakness, that which we have not yet clarified in the light of awareness, that which has not yet been brought into consciousness. Now, there's a tendency with Scorpio to keep everything a secret, right? I'm going to hold my jadedness, my anger, my resentment, all of it inside, and live and perceive and act from the place of just not dealing with that. It's very easy to do that. It's very easy to keep the darkness hidden. And there's really no healing. All of the spiritual teachers that I've ever resonated with, they all say the same thing. On the awakening journey, it's hard because I think at times we face the mess of everything that feels so deeply unresolved and so deeply unhealed. And yet we can't run from it. We have to meet it. The really uncomfortable stuff needs to be met. And if we can meet it without allowing ourselves to be consumed by it, where we then become this victimized being, where we become anger, but neither repressing it and staying in a disempowered state. There's actually a lot of power in meeting the darkness and saying, I see you. I'm not going anywhere, right? Things move there. And there's no way to see our experiences clearly without vision. Vision, true vision with a capital V, is something that doesn't come from our own thinking. It doesn't come from our own conditioning. We can't create it and see things by working out the same dilemmas in our mind over and over and over again. We don't give that to ourselves. It happens. Clear sight, light, the perspective of truth that just kind of is. It enters us. It moves through us when we're not holding on to the darkness. And some of the hardest times in our life are just preceding these moments of clarity and illumination. So this Scorpio-Taurus opposition is a very powerful evolutionary crux. And it says, become a crucible, hold and contain all of this powerful transmutational energy. And if it's difficult, this is an invitation to become even more grounded, less reactive, more thoughtful. With Mercury involved as well, again, just the mindfulness around our speech and our communication and where we're coming from a hurt or victimized place. The other end of that is really clear psychological self-knowledge, the ability to identify specifically the content and the dynamics that we're working with. In fact, a Jupiter-Mercury opposition in these signs is prime fertile ground for really useful insight that is able to extract and articulate the nuance of our own inner psychology. Things that maybe have otherwise felt dark or hidden or unclear or entangled or meshed can be clarified if we're willing to just ride the wave and ground ourselves. Okay. May it be so. Let's focus more on the North Node now, and I'm going to provide a context for, yes, this eclipse, but also a greater evolutionary theme that I see emerging right now. So, the North Node is in Aries, and it's been there for some time. Right now, the nodes are stationing. This is what happened during the eclipse season. The nodes hardly move at all. So it's very focused. In fact, Eris is right there. Maybe I'll mention something about Eris in a moment. Right there, 24 degrees Aries. I would say there has been a very strong Libra focus, right? Mars in Libra on the South Node, Venus retrograde. All the while, the evolutionary focus being Aries on the North Node, that Libra focus has sort of ebbed, okay? We're in a different ecosystem now. And Chiron and the North Node are prevalent, right? Chiron's been, moving retrograde, so it's actually separating a little bit from the North Node right now. But these eclipses are sort of introducing this long-standing Chiron North Node theme. It's like, enter Chiron. This is like the episode where Chiron enters. That's what October has been. And I think that's very evident if we just look at not just our own personal journey, but the collective. Okay, enter Chiron. And we'll speak to this in a moment. What I'm wanting to point out, though, is Aries being highlighted right now is going to say, as we look at this Chiron Aries theme, we have to appreciate that anything on the North Node is a green light for ongoing evolutionary growth. So as we're looking towards Aries, we're saying all that is happening in the vicinity of this Aries North Node becomes an essential component to our personal and collective evolution. And just because it's on the North Node doesn't mean it's easy. It means you have to integrate it. In fact, more often than not, when it comes to Saturn, Chiron, and the outer planets, we'll have to integrate the lessons and the challenges that come from that planet. But North Node, you got to do it. You got to keep on moving, and it's going to have to bring it all out. We're going to have to really face the heart of whatever's on the North Node, okay? So we've entered Aries world, and Chiron is right there. So this is a very strong focus on what's Chiron, the journey of the wounded healer, the journey of making medicine through the tumultuousness, tenderness, and pain, the brokenness of facing the vulnerability of our own condition. Within the Chiron archetype is this sense of being impaired in some essential way, and there is often a wound. It can be a physical wound or a psychological wound, but the nature of a wound speaks to something that isn't going to go away, and it points to that which created the wound in the first place. Rose Marcus always described it as peak experiences, which is very true. So there's the memory of that which created the wound, and the remembrance of that embodied in the wound itself, which is also continually saying, you can't just be free. You can't just do what everyone else does. You can't just ignore your condition and live your life as normal. That can be very difficult and hard to hear and incorporate and work with. So what's the point of it? What's the teaching of it? What's the medicine of it? Our impairment, where things are tender and difficult and hard, is where there is a journey of medicine making, is where there's a particular learning and insight and realization that we can only find through facing that medicine. And here's one aspect of it. With all of this focus on the Aries North Node right now, it says your journey forward requires the courage at times to do it alone, to make your own decisions, to decide this is the path I'm going to walk, this is the change I'm going to make, this is the decision I'm going to make, even if there's self-doubt, Chiron. Even if you don't think you are strong enough or capable, or if you feel too weak, too broken, or there's too much self-doubt, or Libra, no one else understands. Maybe other people have a different opinion, a different desire, a different reflection, or different need, or different projection. The calling here is one of individuation that says, fundamentally, and this brings us back to the Libra, in order to actually be able to sustain relationship and equality and balance, that Aries North Node says, be a leader to your own soul journey. Be a leader to your own soul path. And that might mean you have to trust your own leadership. Aries, as an archetype, says we are separating from that which is stable and grounded. I mean, look at Mars itself. Mars is a circle, which is like wholeness spirit, and a cross emanating from it. It's almost as if it's like a one-wheeled unicycle. As long as you're moving, the unicycle won't fall. You have to stay in continual motion, but that's anxious. Where do I go? What do I do? You have to do something with that energy, and that's the point with Aries and Mars. And sometimes that requires a lot of self-trust and leadership to say, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to learn from the experience. And it's going to be hard, and it might bring up the wounds of separation, the wounds of being alone, the wounds of loneliness. But there are some dimensions of our own spiritual growth where if we're always seeking security or always seeking approval, always seeking affinity, we're never really going to grow into our own true soul strength. So this is a theme that's just emerging right now. Now, Chiron speaks to the wounding experiences where we wound ourselves, where we're wounded, and where we wound others. When we act upon that individuating impulse, but it's selfish and it's narrow, we hurt ourselves, right? So when we're living in a way where we're perceiving adversity out there, we wage war. And at any time I've been in any kind of war with another person, right, be it just an argument, people get hurt. Children, if they're in the room, get hurt. The animals, the plants, anyone in the field, the air absorbs it. The most tender and delicate part of our own being needs to be pushed away and ignored in order to fight. It's implicit that in any kind of war, the most tender and vulnerable are going to be hurt. And then we carry the wounds of that. And it's always a matter of conditions being just right to adequately elicit the presence of these wounds, that vulnerability, the pain. And so that teaches us war hurts. You know, Aries Chiron is basically the wounds of war. And thus the brokenness relative to the wounds of war. The I don't know how to solve this. There must be another way. Let us not continue to run away from our condition. Right? So this says individuate, but this isn't about fighting. This isn't about sort of putting your foot down and saying, you know, I'm going to fight you because you're holding me back. That can just, relative to that Mars and Scorpio, become a very dark place. There is this individuation process that's absolutely necessary here. But I think at the same time, we're allowing our hearts to be broken open as we realize, what are the consequences of fighting? What are the consequences of coming from a place where we think we actually have to be at war with the outer environment? And you know, the two extremes here can be not claiming our individuality and then needing to fight in order to claim it. There's a way of claiming our own soul path and our own self-leadership, our own soul agency at this time that might be tender, that might be difficult, that might mean stepping into the darkness, into the unknown, but it's absolutely necessary. And I'm speaking to our personal lives here, right? And these are things that we can only find out for ourselves. the decisions that we're making and the choices that we're making are for each one of us to figure out. That's what Aries says. In fact, that's what Chiron in Aries says. You can't look on the outside to give you permission or to validate what only you can know. Of course, we see what is happening in Israel and in Gaza right now, which is deeply tender. And I'm not going to open up that box more than I think I can, or hold in a good way, in a clear way, because it's hard. It's hard to speak about it. But what I will, for now, for me at least, what I can address right now is the fact of this is Chiron and Aries on the North Node, giving direct attention to these are the wounds of war. These are the unresolved wounds of violence, and there's no one in that region, there's no group of people that isn't affected by the wounds of violence, the wounds of war. And it's really meaningful to know that the Hamas attack on Israel happened 50 years and a day after the Yom Kippur War. This is the Chiron return. 50 years is a Chiron cycle. So it all comes back, and it comes back, and it comes back. And just think about, that whole region and the thousands of years of war. Like, this is not new in the larger scope, and the horrible things that have happened to all the peoples of that land throughout history. So there's something to think about. There is the Chiron and Aries wound, and we haven't found our medicine yet. We have not found our medicine. And we see the evil and the darkness, the greatest darkness of humanity can come out, right? This is some of the most darkest expressions of what it means to see and to know oneself as a victim in the deepest sense. And we all have that potential within ourselves. And this is what happens when we don't turn to our wounds, when we don't allow ourselves to become vulnerable and humbled by the pain, the challenge of, let me find the right words, the challenge of that which hurts, right? The Aries instinctive responses can be fight, flight, or fawn. None of those are implicitly vulnerable. None of those happen with respect to actually connecting with the heartbreaking reality of our own condition. And I think we can really find that the world is inside of us. And I always come back to the perspective that fundamentally our own self-realization, this is a quote from Ramana Maharshi, is the greatest service we can render to society. Knowing ourselves, waking up. And so this brings us back to, what am I living for? What's my goal? What am I here for? What do I have to do to take greater self-responsibility and self-leadership? And, the higher expression of Aries, if you think of it like, what are we fighting for? The higher expression of Aries is a commitment to uphold and protect that which is sacred and worthy and eternal. Right? The most noble expression of Aries is actions and work, because it's always movement. There's always a choice and movement in some direction. But it's that self-cleaning oven. It's serving that which is just beyond the threshold of action and movement. It's serving the divine eternal spark within all of us. What is that path? What is that unique path of Dharma to walk that only we, at this moment, can decide and choose and affirm for our own selves? We can't tell other people what to do, and we can't look on the outside for confirmation. This is one of those times where it's really up to us. Okay, so I want to close this by giving a perspective on what's happening with this Chiron North Node long term. So, the nodes are stationing, and I mentioned Eris. I won't speak to Eris too much because I'm not knowledgeable in Eris, but anything I've heard about Eris, the one catchphrase is Goddess of Discord. So, just saying that's there. It's obvious. Eris on the North Node, highlighting the Eris. That's a part of what's unfolding right now in our collective evolution. So stationing North Node, but also Chiron still moving backwards, it initiated and introduced through this eclipse season. But let's take a look at what's going to happen. We have right here in December, I'll show you the chart so you can look at it. December 27th, Chiron stations direct. That's sort of like Chiron turning and saying, I'm coming to you, North Node. this becomes another important point along the journey of really seeing and integrating the truth of this Chiron initiatory process. The next important transit would be the actual conjunction. So they actually meet in February. It takes until February of 2024 for Chiron and the North Node to meet each other. And this is profound. I was truly blown away when I saw this. So the October eclipse season features Chiron, and the last solar eclipse was in Libra, and it was opposite Chiron. The next solar eclipse, there'll be a lunar one before this one. This is in April at 19 degrees 24 minutes Aries, combust. Right? 19 degrees 24 minutes. Chiron, moon, sun, combust. It's a solar eclipse on the North Node in Aries, combust Chiron. So that's powerful. It's a very powerful signature. There's so much to unpack about that, and I'll save it for a future month. But this just says this is just beginning, and this is actually an intensification. This is the initiatory think of it as an initiatory process. So in initiations, you're challenged. But it always says in an initiation, there's some sort of essential spiritual growth on the other end of it, and we have to go through it. And the Chiron will be very active even beyond April, but it's still going to be in vicinity of the North Node. It's going to be engaging with all the Aries energy, but this is sort of one of the last big transits of that season. So I think that just is helpful in giving us some perspective on the greater themes that are unfolding right now. So for those who don't know, I often write articles in conjunction with these teachings, and I send them out. Sometimes they come at the same time, sometimes they stagger. So if you'd like to receive these articles, as well as any updates on classes and courses that I'm teaching, you can sign up for my newsletter in the description below. And thank you so much for watching.